The Hanoi prisons?
Yes, yes. I was there for
what years?
1967, 1973.
Why didn't you get out of the service when you got back?
I loved the Navy, and I was able to get back on flying status, and I was able to continue flying, which, by the way, took some skill to do, but after a certain number of years, I failed my flying physical, and so I had to get out. My physical injuries caught up with me to a large degree.
We read so much about the impact, and I've heard a lot about the impact on the individuals, the stress, the post-Vietnam stress syndrome that we keep hearing so much about. Has that impacted you at all?
I've never had a nightmare. I've never had a flashback. I've never had any particular memories except the ones that I cherish are the friends that I made and the wonderful relationships that we forged together. I hold no bitterness nor anger, and I would attribute part of that to the fact that I was 29 years old when I was shot down and captured, and I was a professional military pilot. Many of the people that we find that have difficulties and have not, or either difficulties readjusting or have not readjusted, many of them were the 18, 19-year-old young draftees who went and served and frankly were very badly treated on their return, in my view, and not given the welcome home which we've belatedly given them after Operation Desert Storm.
What's the legacy of Vietnam?
Never again should we go into a conflict unless we are clear in our goals and we are prepared to do what is necessary to win victory as rapidly as possible. I think in retrospect, maybe 100 years from now, it will have been good for America to define the limits of power. Up until that time, as you know, we could go anywhere, bear any burden in the world, in the words of John F. Kennedy. We understood, and I hope we continue to understand, the limits of use of military power, and although Desert Storm was a wonderful success, which we're all proud of, we have to be very, very selective where we send young Americans to fight and die.
We have a last bit of tape to show you. This is the Hoa Lo prison, which is in a different part of the town. What do you remember about this when you look at it?
Well, this prison that you're going to see, as I mentioned, was built in 1943 by the French, and it was well built. It has a lot of cells in it, all of them solitary cells. They're small. They have many of them have stocks on the wooden bed. They have small, open little doors, peepholes for the guards to look through, and I think it would have been a very tough place to live for us, but also for the Vietnamese when the French had that prison. It is still used, I'm told, as a prison by the Vietnamese. You're seeing one of the entrances there, I believe, to the prison. And there was no exercise area or any open area like we saw in the other prison.
How many were there with you?
There was about, I think there was about 50 or 60 of us in there at one time. And then after they moved us all into large, see, this you can't tell us too much from the camera, but this prison covers a very large city block, very large city block. The part we were in were where the individual cells are. In 1970 and 71, they moved us into large cells with 40 or 50 each, which was in another part of the prison. And as I say, the large cells were quite nice as compared with the small ones. To say the least.
We were there on a couple of different days. I remember one day when I was there, and I don't have the tape right now, but standing, looking at the prison, and there aren't many cars in Hanoi, all of a sudden a 27-car procession came by with the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He had a 200-person delegation in Hanoi, all for the purpose of setting up a trade relation. And you saw that the entire time you were, at least I saw it the entire time I was in Vietnam. Lee Kuan Yew, former Prime Minister of Singapore, was there also while we were there. Does it worry you on the trade side that we may be waiting too long to lift this embargo?
It does worry me. Clearly those countries, especially Japan, are moving into those markets, and they have shown that they're fertile markets. I mean, the Vietnamese, when given the opportunity, look what they've done here in America, are very industrious, productive people, as long as they don't have this communist doctrine guiding them. At the same time, I think we have to face reality, and that is that the American people are not prepared to extend that to the Vietnamese until there's a full accounting as possible of those who are still listed as missing in action. I'd also point out that it's a very, very poor country, and there's not an instant market there. It's one of the lowest per capita incomes in the world. So when we talk about all this this market there. A lot of it is there in the form of natural resources. As you know, there's the belief that there's oil and gas there, and I think American companies could take advantage of that. And I also think that sometimes we cannot just put commercial interests paramount to all others, and they have to be balanced against a lot of other issues that face this country. And I think it's also well to point out one other fact. A lot of Americans still resent the fact that Vietnam was the country that inflicted the first defeat on this country, and we have to get over that part of it too, which I think we are with the ending of the Cold War.
Will you go back?
Yes, I would go back if it would do some good. You know, the reason why I didn't go back this time with Senator Kerry and Senator Smith was because I had been there the year before and I didn't see anything particularly beneficial to going back this time that they couldn't do. And the other thing is I always have to be a little bit careful that the Vietnamese don't try again to somehow use me for their own purposes. And you know, you just have to be a little rather careful to that. But they are, it's interesting how much my name is known around Vietnam. It's amazing.
As you know, anybody can travel there.
Yes.
Any American, although American travel agents, and I'm not sure what the last couple of weeks has been, but they have to go through an Australian travel agent or Hong Kong or whatever. Do you recommend to veterans or even people who have never been there that they go?
It's a lovely country. There are some parts of it that are magnificently beautiful. I think that many of our veterans have found it to be very therapeutic to travel back to Vietnam. I think they have enormous tourist potential if they had the right kind of system again. And I would recommend that people go if they so choose. I think they should understand, one, that the conditions are still not good as far as hygiene and that kind of thing are concerned, as I think you will attest. I think also they got to understand accommodations are still very, very poor. And I think they also have to understand that the Vietnamese are going to rip them off every chance they get. Didn't you notice that? They had their hand out for every car, every driver, every, you know, you're kind of at their mercy because there's no rental car, there's no kind of thing.
I must say, though, it was much more prevalent in the South than it was in the North with the handout.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there were fewer hands out in Hanoi than there were in Saigon.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. So I think you have to understand that it is really roughing it. Although, as you noticed, there's a floating hotel in Saigon that the Australians have brought around, which I understand are good accommodations. When I was in South Vietnam, I stayed at the old Rex Hotel, which many of our veterans will recognize was an R&R hotel in Saigon, and I swear to you, it hadn't changed a bit.
We stayed there.
You know, the bar on top on the roof and all that had not changed a bit. It was like a leap backwards about 20 years historically. But I don't think there's any doubt that they will improve and their tourist facilities will improve, et cetera. And I've talked to many Vietnam veterans who felt it was a great and healing experience for them to go back. I strongly recommend they do so if they feel that that's best for them. I've talked to some others that say, look, I never want to see the place again. All it does is dredge up old terrible memories. So I think it's up to the individual. I do believe there are parts of the country, as you noticed, Ha Long Bay, I believe it is, and some others that are really lovely places. But again, the accommodations aren't much.
Must report to you that in Hanoi there's a new renovated hotel called the Metropole. It was there when you were there, but the French have come in and renovated it. 109 rooms and about $100 a night per room. And it's 40% owned by the French and 60% owned by the Vietnamese.
And I think we would also agree, although it's very run down, the city of Hanoi is very pretty with the trees and the old French buildings and all that. If they could spruce it up, get some paint and some things, it would be a very pretty old city, very attractive.
Senator McCain, we're out of time. Thank you for sharing your experience with us on this special Vietnam Revisited.
Thank you, Brian. And could I say on Memorial Day, which is Monday, a lot of this is going to be shown, we should appreciate the service and sacrifice, not only those who are still around, but those who are not. And we will always cherish their memories.
Thank you.
You're watching Vietnam Revisited on C-SPAN. In 1950, the United States became involved in Vietnam by sending 35 soldiers as part of the Military Assistance Advisor Group. By 1969, the number of U.S. troops in Vietnam reached 534,000. During the Vietnam War, Can Tho Air Base was the headquarters for the South Vietnamese 4th Corps. Con Tou is a port on the Mekong River and the center of economic and military activity in the delta. After the ceasefire in 1973, the city was the headquarters for the Office of the Consul General for the Delta region. Vietnam Revisited continues in a few moments with an interview with No Thi Ching, otherwise known as Hanoi Hannah. She is known for her radio broadcast during the Vietnam War that delivered messages to U.S. soldiers. But first, a recent look at Con Tou Air Base in the Mekong Delta.
Nice to see you again. How are you? Glad to see you again.
You remember Mr. Falls?
Yes, I sure
You do remember him.
Yeah. We got to know each other pretty well.
That's right.
Senator Smith here.
Nice to see you, sir. How are you?
Senator Grassley from Iowa. Senator Robb. Senator Brown, Colorado.
Welcome to Vietnam.
Thank you for meeting us. Nice to see you again.
Sir, you're in the lead vehicle in this one right here. Senator Grassley and Senator Smith, sir. You're in the second vehicle.
Okay.
There.
Hey, Bill. How are you? How you doing? Good to see you. How are you? Fine. I'm glad you're out here.
Yes,
Good
sir.
to see you.
Hi, Bill.
So how are you?
How are you? Sure. Good to see you.
Senator Grassley, this is Bill Bell.
Good to see you, Bill.
Chuck Robb, Bill Bell.
So how are you?
Hank Brown.
Hi, Bill. Hank Brown.
We're going to get a chance to spend some time shortly. I want to chat with you.
Yes, sir.
As soon as we can. Yeah, we possible. So maybe right when we get in, we can spend a minute.
Yes, sir.
Good. All right. We all set?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hi, Bill.
Thanks.
Hey, how you doing? Dino? I left a note. I have a note. Sorry about that. Which note? The little note. How much?
Hai người có thể ngồi chung được. Rất có thể ngồi ai.
Không, tôi đi xe khác.
All set? Francis, do you have the other bag?
Oh, these are my biking guys, the Northern Virginia bike trails.
Is that right?
70 Ks a day in and out from Reston, Virginia.
This guy is incredible. Last time I was here, he'd be out early in the morning in these tight jogging shorts. You know, he'd be out there talking to everybody in the streets.
Still doing it.
Yeah, he still does it. He's incredible.
You manage to do it every day?
I tried to.
Oh, yeah.
So you heard our comments.
Yeah.
On Voice of America.
Did they meet with approval or disapproval?
Là hỏi là quý vị là đồng ý hay là không đồng ý với ý kiến của ông?
Positive comment.
Positive comment.
Positive comments.
Chúng tôi chuẩn bị để mọi điều kiện để đoàn có thể làm việc một cách thắng lợi ở Việt Nam.
And they prepared very closely to meet the best conditions for you, for your delegation, to look at the situation in Vietnam.
Well, we, as you know from the communication that we sent you, this is a very important trip with great possibilities.
Và